Hello friends, for today's video I want to do a tier ranking of popular BookTok books. I think for a lot of us what even is considered a popular BookTok book can mean different things. So before we get into the tier ranking itself, I wanted to have a small discussion about our perception of BookTok books. Before starting to do research, not just for this video, but hopefully future videos that are going to have a conversation about BookTok and its impact on publishing, on readers, on what books we pick up, on what books get popular. As I was doing research for all of that, I came to realize that my perception might be a little bit inaccurate. And we won't go too in depth as to where that perception comes from for today, but I do need to touch on it a little bit as it impacts the books that I'm going to be tier ranking. So first, I think, just to be honest, I'll admit that for me, I always associate BookTok with contemporary romance books and steamy fantasy romance, but at the end of the day, some kind of romance. I'm always surprised when I walk into a bookstore. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the tables that will say, as seen on BookTok, or goodness forbid we see the stickers. None of us like permanent stickers anyway, but also when it says as seen on BookTok, we have seen those hashtag BookTok tables, and every now and then I'm like, wait, really? This book? And I'll find a book on there that I definitely do not associate with BookTok. And I think that part of our way of seeing it, and maybe it's just me, so if you did not have the same perception, feel free to mention what yours was in the comments, because I'd love to know if I'm alone in this or not. But I think part of it is that we think of the user of BookTok. We kind of have a certain image in our mind of who that person is and thus what they would like. And it's not all that different, I find, from not so many years ago when YA books were kind of the thing that we looked at and maybe stuck our noses up at. I am always advocating for not doing that because I think that it only ever prevents people from feeling welcome into reading. It certainly doesn't make young people that are the target demographic of young adult books feel like it's the cool thing to do or that reading is something that they should find enriching. It's kind of like if adults are all looking down at the things that are geared toward them, how is that supposed to make them feel? So I absolutely cannot stand us collectively. I'm not saying any individual person, and I don't think a lot of you do this, but we all know that there is a certain attitude that people have and did have toward young adult books a few years ago. And now that BookTok has become popular, it's like the readers of YA books we now kind of have put over here into the BookTok social media platform. And so we have a certain stereotype of the person. And we also then are like, well, they've aged up a little bit. You know, they're no longer between the ages of 12 and 18. They're maybe 19, 20, 21, 22. And we kind of have this view of them, their age. And then we kind of just took the exact same things they usually like, and then we aged that up a little bit too. So for example, rather than having the dystopian story or the vampire romance that was relatively PG in actuality, instead of that, we're now getting steamy fantasy romance books like Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and just Ali Hazelwood books in general as an example. Which, yes, those are some of the books that do end up being popular on BookTok, but I think that we take that image of that kind of a reader and that kind of book taste, and then we decide everybody on BookTok must have that. And then we kind of perpetuate this idea here on BookTube because we will sometimes have videos titled things like, I read BookTok's, and then fill in the blank, like, you know, steamy, billionaire, rich. Well, yeah, billionaires are rich, duh. But just like some kind of like billionaire werewolf romance or something like that. And it's like, okay, is that actually a bestseller? I'm kind of curious. So when I was making this list, I was thinking there's no way I'm going to have even read enough BookTok books to tier rank very many things. But I did not even specify fantasy. I just went on various different retailers. I went to different library sites. And then, of course, you know, the physical bookstore, their BookTok tables. And I was pretty shocked at the things that actually get considered to be BookTok books and how many of them I have read. So, all of that said, if you'd like to comment on just this first portion and how maybe you feel, oh yeah, I did have this idea. Maybe you're just one of those people that's like, I don't even hardly go on social media, so I don't have anything to draw from anyway. But all that said, the list of books, we have Six of Crows, Cruel Prince, Book Lovers, Babel, House in the Cerulean Sea, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I will just abbreviate that to Addie LaRue when I talk about it, Beach Read, A Court of Thorns and Roses, People We Meet on Vacation, Legends and Lattes, The Love Hypothesis, The Shadows Between Us, Throne of Glass, Kingdom of the Wicked, Mistborn, Way of Kings, Sword of Kaigen, Fourth Wing, Song of Achilles, Divine Rivals, Every Summer After, Yellowface, Happy Place, and Get a Life, Chloe Brown. So some of those, I'm sure you're like, yeah, I figured. But I was baffled. When I saw Way of Kings, I was like, that must be a mistake, right? That's not a popular book talk book. I don't know why I thought it wouldn't be. I think I have in my mind because Sanderson is not a niche by any means. He's one of the most successful fantasy authors, but because he doesn't have the romance that in my mind is what I think of when I think book talk, and because he doesn't have adaptations currently of his works, in my mind he is sort of this niche, like it's just us fantasy people in this corner over here, which is dumb. That's dumb. But anyway, I was surprised. Is anybody else surprised that Way of Kings was on there? Sword of Kaigen I was especially shocked by because Sword of Kaigen is a BookTube darling. Many of us here on YouTube really love this story. It is originally self-published, and I'm not sure if it's going to be picked up because ML Wong has another book that's going to be picked up, so Sword of Kaigen might be as well. But regardless, it is kind of seen more as an underhyped story, but because it's self-published, whenever I go to provide links for all of you for the books I talk about in various videos, whenever Sword of Kaigen comes up and I go on the website bookshop.org, which is a website where the profits go toward indie bookstores, which is great. So I always try to provide links through them, but not everything is available through them. So Sword of Kaigen is one of those that's not, and so I often have to do an Amazon link. And I saw it listed as like a book talk sensation on Amazon, and I was like, what? Really? Now jumping into the tier ranking. There are going to be 6 tiers, and the way I'm kind of shaping this is the top 3 tiers are all books that I enjoy, that I would purchase, that I would read again, and then the bottom 3 tiers are ones that didn't really work for me. I purposefully did not want to do 5 tiers, even though it's nice to have a dedicated middle. I don't like when it's even because then there's not actually a middle section, but regardless, I just couldn't find that I wanted to include certain ones in the same. I felt like I needed to broaden it, but then also I did not want this to come across like I was saying if I put something in the bottom tier that it is a 1-star read, as when you obviously have 5 tiers, it can look like it's a 1-to-1 relation between stars and the tier ranking, which I didn't want. This is just simply, these books worked for me, these books didn't work for me, these are books I absolutely love, and I'm totally with BookTok on the hype, and then some of them I'm like, no, BookTok, I don't agree. When doing tier ranking videos, I prefer to have everything laid out beforehand because I get really indecisive, and I do not want to waste all of your time being like, do I want this in this tier, but do I think it's as good as this book? But I like this one better, but I don't know if it belongs here. I don't want to do that to all of you. I'm not going to subject you to all of that. So I like to have everything done ahead of time, which I have done. And because usually there are 5 tiers, that means there's a nice middle tier to start with. But because I've made it 6 tiers, I'm actually going to start with tiers 3 and 4 first and then work my way out, as I like starting with more middle of the road feelings and then getting into the extremes. And I'm going to continue that by starting in tier 4. So these are ones that I don't have incredibly strong feelings for either way, but they lean toward, this wasn't exactly for me, but I definitely understand why people really love this. And I'm going to start with one that, which one should I start with? I think I'm going to start with House in the Cerulean Sea. I am very much in the unpopular camp of thinking this book was just fine. I understand why people love it because the themes are really beautiful and really sweet. The sense of found family is delightful and charming in this story. I just found what was meant to be sort of this apathetic character who experienced a lot of growth in the story to not necessarily feel apathetic enough. They just sort of existed, and then everyone around them had a lot of personality. So it made it where it almost felt like a reader insert. I'm not necessarily saying that's exactly what TJ Klune did or was going for, but it is how it felt to me. And I wanted to root for my main character a little bit more. I wanted to like them a little bit more, or dislike them, or feel more gripped by their journey and their arc through the story, and I didn't really necessarily, but I definitely understand why people really adore this one. After that, we have A Court of Thorns and Roses. I know for a lot of people this is their introduction to fantasy or fantasy romance, and I've always been of the mindset that this book is either incredibly loved or incredibly hated and mocked, and I kind of don't get either extreme. I think it's fine. I don't dislike Sarah J. Maas's literal writing, the prose itself, and I don't mind the way she tells a story. I just find that I want there to be a little bit more of a balance between the romantic aspects of the story and the fantasy aspects of the story, as opposed to feeling like it's a romance that exists in a fantasy world. I'll fully admit that I'm still on my quest to find fantasy romance that really fits that, because in a sense, if it is fantasy romance, it's of course primarily going to be a romance in a fantasy world, but I want that blend. I want it to be basically even, maybe a little more fantasy than romance, or maybe the tiniest bit more romance than fantasy, but I want all of the greatness that is epic fantasy, but with a love story that you just can't get enough of, and I just haven't found that yet in book form. So ACOTAR, I don't hate, I don't love. It's fine. After that, we have 2 Emily Henry books. Luna Bear's here to provide her opinions. But we have 2 Emily Henry books, which would be Beach Read and Happy Place. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Emily Henry's works when I do dip my toes outside of fantasy and I'm looking for something that's just cozy and fun and lighthearted, but has actually some surprising themes that catch you off guard, and they're the kind of things that feel very normal and day-to-day, which is what you want out of a contemporary, I find. When I want those things, I go to Emily Henry's books. So there's been a couple that have been standouts that I've really, really enjoyed, but Happy Place and Beach Read, for me, are not the 2 stronger. I have these 2. The rest of the ones in this particular tier I don't actually own. They're the kind of books that if somebody gifted to me, then maybe I would keep, but I probably wouldn't go out and spend my money, and these 2 are the exception just because I like Emily Henry's works as a whole, and so I kind of want to support her and her career. So I do have these 2. But they're the reason why these 2 books in particular are an example of ones that when I was trying to determine where I wanted to put everything, I was like, but I own these, so do they technically go up higher? But I don't know if I enjoy them as much as the ones in tier 3, and I was just overthinking it. So these 2, while I found them enjoyable, I wasn't having a bad time when I read them. I just don't think they're the best of Emily Henry. After that, Song of Achilles, perhaps the most unpopular opinion on this tier ranking. So Song of Achilles, to me, the writing is great. I would read something else by Madeline Miller. I hated Achilles in this. He was so incredibly selfish, which I know was the point. I know it. I'm not saying it was a bad book. I'm not saying it was poorly written. I just hated him so much. And it was frustrating because I was really looking forward to getting to see maybe a more nuanced take of this character, and also Patroclus and their dynamic and their relationship, and I was really looking forward to that, and instead I just got what I feel I have seen of Achilles before, this just arrogant person obsessed with legacy who doesn't consider those around them, and I guess I wanted a little bit more than that, and I'm not saying that's bad, that it wasn't written that way, because that is that character. So on one hand, I respect that we didn't completely forego the origin and the current view we have of this character. We didn't change them entirely. I just find that a lot of times retellings, what they do so well is they provide those extra layers where you then feel like they're a little bit more humanized. And for me, Achilles, I just despised him. Maybe that is humanizing him because sometimes people suck. But I just couldn't. I hated him. So that's why that's here. Next up, we have Throne of Glass, similar to ACOTAR. It's fine. You know, I've read a fair amount of the books in that series. I never disliked my reading time with them, but I didn't really like it that much. I do think it's great that there is what is essentially an epic fantasy world for young adult readers, because you don't see very much epic fantasy and really long book series like this in young adult, and I wish there was more of that, and I think that that continues to be why this book has so much success, this book series has so much success. And there are some pretty cool things in the fantasy elements that are done that I can definitely see a younger me loving, but just currently where I am right now, I don't really feel I'm the target demographic, which is completely fine, but I don't hate these with a fiery passion. And then last for this list is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I actually think I'm kind of viewing the Brown sisters, the 3 books, as one, even though I'm specifically referring to Chloe Brown. I think the one I liked the most was the second one. The first one was fine. It was cute. I think that the mental health and physical disability representation was really delightful. I thought the dynamic between the characters was sweet. But as a whole, like I said, for all 3 books, I think I liked the second one the most, then the first one, then the third one. The third one I didn't like quite as much, which I've heard some people say that that's the best one. So I don't know if that's just what I've seen a few people say or if that's actually the agreed upon take, but these are fine. That's the thing with a lot of this particular tier is like they're fine, but I don't feel a need to keep them. Now being a little bit more positive and going to tier 3. I don't have too many in this tier, but I'm just going to go through them relatively quick. So we have Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is one where the themes have really stuck with me, and I think the longer the amount of time has gone by since I've read it, the more I appreciate that book. And I appreciated it when I read it at the same time. I just feel like it kind of sits with you, which is something that I think great fiction is really accomplished at. That said, I do feel because the themes were so powerful and because there was so much to them that I wish we had actually done more with those and done a little bit less with some of the other things that transpire in that book. And I actually think it could have been a series, or that we could have had that first book broken up into multiple books, and I might have liked it a little bit more. I just think I would have liked more perspectives, given that so much of what's happening is so representative of these big events that aren't just in the story, but actually have real world implications as well, and real world inspirations. Next up, completely different from Babel, we have Legends and Lattes. So I think Legends and Lattes is very cute. I was a little tentative when I went in because so many people were hyping it up, and I always get nervous when I see extreme hype, thinking like, oh, there's no way. At this point, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this too. When you have so many people shouting about something, you just feel like it's impossible for that, whatever it is. It doesn't even just have to be a book. It can be a TV show, a video game, a movie. But when you hear such praise heaped onto it, you can't help but feel like there's no way it's going to meet it. And that was what I was feeling when I went into Legends and Lattes, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find that it was just as cute and cozy as everybody had said. I don't think anybody, though, has talked about Legends and Lattes like it's the best thing since sliced bread, and that it is somehow transforming their life and everything like that. So I don't think, even though there was a lot of hype, I don't think it was the sort of talk you hear sometimes about how something changed a person's entire view of the world. It changed my life. It wasn't one of those kinds of books. And I think that kind of helped temper my expectations, even though it did get a lot of hype. It was very cute. I actually like the prequel more, though, I think. They're both quite precious, and I am glad that they're both popular. Next up, I feel that this maybe is surprising that I love this. I shouldn't say I love it, but that it's where it is. And that would be The Shadows Between Us. I wouldn't say I love it. I want to be clear. I don't love this. The ones I love are at the top, which we'll get to. But it was just so ridiculous that I was like, this is fun. This is fun how ridiculous this is. If you don't know, the setup is that you're following a girl who, her plan is to get this notable man to marry her. And then once he does, she's going to kill him and take all of his wealth, basically. That's her plan. That's your main character. And it's so knows what it is. It's not trying to act like, but actually she has really legitimate reasons for like, it's not like that. It kind of feels like satire. And I do enjoy books that really lean into what they are. So I did enjoy this one. There is a part of me that's like, doesn't belong in this tier. But it was fun. I had fun with it, and I don't want to overthink it. And then Cruel Prince is the last one in this tier. For clarity's sake, just to say, I'm not going through these, and the ones I mentioned first I think are the best, and then the ones at the end of a given tier are the worst. That's not how I'm doing it. If they're in this tier, they're just in this tier, and I am not going to take the time to pit them against each other within each tier, because this would last all day. So, Cruel Prince, anyway, getting back to that. I think that the first book is fine. The second book is my favorite. I really enjoyed that one. I thought there was so much scheming and twists and turns, and it was everything I wanted out of the sinister nature of the Fae in that story. And then the third one, The Queen of Nothing, was kind of like, not as good. But Cruel Prince as a whole, I do think that Holly Black is doing Fae a little bit different than what is currently popular. While, yes, they're beautiful and they look down on humans and they have some of those typical things that you think of when you think of Fae stories, she also manages to capture just how malevolent their view of things is and how much that they rely on trickery and deceit, and I really enjoyed those elements of that series, so Cruel Prince is in this tier. Now getting into tier 2 and tier 5. I have more in tier 2, I was happy to say, so I'm going to start in tier 5 and just get this over with. The Love Hypothesis. It was fine. I mean, I don't think that it's kind of like what I said about ACOTAR. I see such vitriol sometimes when people talk about the Love Hypothesis, and I don't feel that worked up by it. There was cheesy. It was pretty cheesy, in my opinion. It was silly. It definitely pulled from all the different tropes. It definitely felt inspired somewhat by fan fiction, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just meant that in some areas it lacked what felt like originality, and a little bit like it really was coming from a place of the author like having to tell a story. You know, when you read a book and you're like, this is unlike anything, it's groundbreaking, it's different, and I'm so happy that this author didn't allow themselves to be pigeonholed. They told the story they wanted to tell, and now it's getting success, and that's so amazing, and that's just such a good feeling. And the Love Hypothesis is a little bit not that. It's more of like, it's the Kylo Ren look of the characters, but I do appreciate the STEM setting and career for our character. That does make it a little bit, I think, stand out, and I think that's what a lot of people gravitated toward, but for me it's just not one of the better contemporary romances I've read. And then Kingdom of the Wicked. This is one, when I first started, I was really surprised at how much I was liking it. It was kind of like a murder mystery, and then I feel bad saying this, but I almost got bummed out when it became more fantasy leaning, because as much as I love fantasy, it sort of set me up at the beginning to think, oh, we're investigating what's going on with her sister, and there's this really great setting that's being established, and I'm liking all of this. This is not at all what I thought it was going to be based off of how I hear people talk about it. And then fantasy things came into the picture, and a lot of it felt a little bit convenient. I don't feel like things were established the way that I want out of my fantasy when it comes to the magic and rules and limitations. So for that reason, Kingdom of the Wicked is in this tier. Now up to the second tier, where we've got a lot of stuff that I quite like. First up, Six of Crows. When it comes to Six of Crows, I am not breaking out of the mold. I like that duology quite a bit, and I'm so sad that the adaptation got canceled, because it was one of the few fantasy adaptations that was fairly true to the book. Some of the changes, I was like, I'm not upset about those changes. That I think actually enhanced the story. I liked the casting. Oh my gosh, the casting was perfect. Anyway, the source material, though, I do really enjoy as well. I like Six of Crows, so that one is up here. After that, we have Book Lovers. So this is an example of one of Emily Henry's books that I quite like. I know that some people really didn't care for this one, but I liked a lot of the themes in this. I resonated quite a bit with aspects of it. And I really liked that we took a completely different type of character as our protagonist than what we usually see. So I quite liked Book Lovers. After that, we have People We Meet on Vacation. So another Emily Henry book. I almost want to reread all of Emily Henry's works at some point, but I'm like, well, I have so many other things to read, like a lot of us do. But I think this one might still be my favorite. I can't tell because I read it. It was one of the first ones I read, and it's been a while. So that's why I say I kind of want to reread them, and I would want to do almost a marathon and read them all back to back so that I could really assess. But this one, I can't relate to the characters, but I just really loved the way in which they were written. I liked the dynamic between the main character and the love interest. I really enjoyed this one. And then Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I think I have the very unpopular opinion of liking Yellowface more than Babel. And Yellowface is hit or miss for a lot of people. But I really liked how much R.F. Kuang did not shy away from making our main character so unlikable. And it was kind of what I was saying about The Shadows Between Us, where I appreciate when authors really lean into what they're doing, and I feel like Yellowface absolutely did that. It was satirical, it was snarky, it was self-aware, and it was in some ways somewhat nonsense while still simultaneously representing the worst of real life and privileged individuals. So I really liked Yellowface quite a lot. After that, Divine Rivals. I was unsure whether I wanted to put Divine Rivals in the top, so just know that this one, if there was another tier, I feel like it would be between 1 and 2. Maybe it's actually at the top. I don't know. I love Divine Rivals a lot. This one might actually be at the top, but whatever. I'm not going to waste time changing things. But I love Divine Rivals. I love the way in which we see people who are journalists, people who are putting their lives in danger to reveal the truth, which is something I think is absolutely heroic. I liked seeing that as our main characters. I liked that it wasn't your typical fantasy story, but that it still managed to be whimsical and captivating and powerful. I thought it was incredible. I definitely think this one deserves the hype. And then last for this, we have Addie LaRue, another one that seems to be very hit or miss for people. This one, when I was in the middle of reading it, especially at the beginning, I was like, wow, I think this is going to be one of my new favorite standalones of all time. And it is within my top standalones for adult fantasy works, purely because there are certain scenes that hit so hard and were so moving. And then I do feel like it's a little rocky. The particular setup it has is one that is hard to make it a satisfying conclusion. And because of that, that's what kept it from being a little bit higher. But again, the moving moments were so moving that I would be remiss to not have this in one of the higher tiers. And now getting into the highest tier and the lowest tier. I think I'll start with the lowest tier. Every Summer After, I'd read something else by this author, but the main character is such a dum-dum that I hated her. I didn't hate her while I was reading. While I was reading, I was like, you feel kind of annoying, but maybe I'll discover something about you that'll make me change my mind. And it did. It went from mildly annoying to you're despicable and stupid. So it's here. I just hate her. I hate her so much. And then Fourth Wing, I think in the past I might have had Fourth Wing a little higher in other tier ranking videos, maybe. But in regards to this particular list of books, I don't like it as much. I don't love the writing. I don't love the periods between so many words all the time so that it is impactful. Okay, it's not between syllables. I shouldn't have said it like that. It's between words. But it feels like how people text each other, and that's not what I want out of my fantasy stories. I think the main character, Vi or Violet, is annoying. I think the stakes are kind of forced. I think that the dynamic between her and the love interest is not my favorite. It's mostly rooted in lust, which is fine if that's what you're into. I liked the dragons, though. I like the dragons a lot. I wish the dragons from that could be in a different story. Just take the humans out of the equation. Which is, I feel like, you know what? Somebody needs to make a story where they take... so you know how... I want to be clear about what I'm about to say. So, have you ever heard of certain comic series, like, I think Black Hammer is an example, where the heroes, the superhero-like characters in the stories, are basically the ones from, you know, Marvel, DC. They're like a stand-in for Batman, or they're a stand-in for Superman, or they're a stand-in for Wonder Woman. Those kinds of things where you can tell, like, this is basically that character. So I feel like somebody needs to do that with a bunch of well-known mythological creatures and animal companions from stories and do something cute with that, like some kind of middle grade story or something, or a cozy fantasy. Can someone do that? That would be so cute. Like, imagine Appa from Avatar and Syl. She's not really an animal companion, but she's kind of a mythological creature, like a Syl and other Spren from Stormlight Archive, and just all the cute animal companions. The ones from like the Bone Shard series, the Drowning Empire series is what it's called. Oh, that would be so cute. But anyway, that's not the point. Let's go up to the top tier. Speaking of Syl, Way of Kings. No one's surprised, right? that I have Way of Kings and Mistborn at the top. I have Way of Kings, Mistborn, and Sword of Kaigen. And then, like I said, maybe Divine Rivals, but we're not going to worry about that. So I like the Cosmere. So that's why these are up here. I don't think I need to elaborate because I think my 100+ videos on this channel dedicated to things related to the Cosmere probably has done the talking for me. And then Sword of Kaigen, I think is fantastic. I do think it has its hiccups, but kind of what I said about Addie LaRue, but to the nth degree, as far as the moving moments being so incredibly moving, it kind of helps make it easy to forget the parts that I didn't like as much. Very much that for Sword of Kaigen. It's so good, so unexpected, devastating. The themes are really well done. Really love Sword of Kaigen. But anyway, that's it. To reiterate, this is just me looking at how much I align with BookTok. So I'm not saying that there's any kind of objectivity. The ones at the bottom are objectively bad, and the ones at the top are objectively good. It's just all opinion and the things that fit my taste versus the things that do not. I am curious though, as I said at the beginning, I would love to know which books definitely fit within your perception of BookTok, and then which ones completely took you aback. And then also coming up, I alluded to this and mentioned this a few times, but I'm planning to do quite a few other videos dissecting aspects of BookTok and its impacts. So be on the lookout for those things. The likely next one that will be coming up after this will be the From Readers, which is a video series where if you are new and don't know, I ask everybody over on my community tab and my Patreon to fill in the blank from readers. And this particular one is going to be to BookTok from readers. So we're going to be going through your thoughts on BookTok as a whole, and I'm really excited to do that and then kind of do deep dives into other areas of BookTok. But that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.